His quotes are still seen circulating around social media or perhaps shared as an intention during a yoga class. So it's easy to forget, or maybe not even know, that this famous spiritual guru was actually behind the United States' largest and only bioterror attack. So, why is he still propped up as a spiritual authority today? In this video, we're going to dive into the life, crimes, and practices of Osho. It's time to open a window and our minds and let the fresh air in. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're brand new. My name is Erin and I am fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. I upload 3 videos a week on one of these topics, so if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. I would absolutely love to have you. And also, I was raised by a single mother, so I know how challenging this time of year can be. So in each video this month, I'm sponsoring a single parent. And today, that parent is Crystal. She is single, divorced, and a proud Navy vet. She has experienced a very difficult year this year and is hoping for a little help with her kids this season, 2 of which also have birthdays this month, so I'm sure she's feeling the pressure. She has 6 children and has listed 2 gifts for each child, and you'll find the link to her Amazon wish list down in the pinned comment under this video. So I really hope we can get all of the items on her list. It's just 12 items, so please go support her if you have the means this year. And I thank you for your support in advance. So now let's get right into this story. I've shared many times that I am a spiritual girly. I meditate every morning, I do breath work frequently, and I've been diving back into my yoga practice, and I've been doing that almost every day for the last 2 weeks. I'm very proud of myself. And I also used to teach yoga. And I remember in my training frequently hearing the name Osho and listening to yoga teacher after yoga teacher share a quote from him. And I see his quotes pop up on social media super frequently. And, I used to think he was this very insightful guru. And, some quotes would resonate with me. But now when I see them, I just honestly can't help but roll my eyes because, well, my eyes have been opened to all of the damage this person has done. I remember a couple of years ago watching Wild Wild Country, a documentary on Netflix, and I was utterly shocked at what I learned about Osho and his right-hand woman at the time, and how many terrible crimes they committed, all in the name of Osho and freedom. Well, back then, he went by Bhagwan Rajneesh because, after they broke several immigration laws and tried to poison 750 people, he had to rebrand. So Osho was born. Now, the documentary went into great details regarding the crimes that were committed, and I'll definitely talk about those because they're so extreme, but I really wanted to understand more about this cult and the inner workings within it. So I'll be sharing my opinion throughout this video as I do, and I'll try to make sure I specify when I'm doing it or be a little, I guess, sassy with it so that you don't mix up my opinion with the facts of this case. I want to make sure that everyone has a clear picture of what was really going on. And honestly, this might be one of several videos because as I dive deeper, there is just so much more to learn and go through, and a lot of it's really upsetting. So let's get started. Who was Bhagwan Rajneesh? Bhagwan Shri Rajneesh was born on December 11th, 1931 in Kuchwada, India. Sources say he lived with his grandparents at first, but later went to live with his parents Saraswati Jain and Babulal. It is said that he was a very intelligent child, but was also extremely rebellious and seemed to be a handful for his parents and his grandparents alike. He didn't like being told what to do, what to think, or how to behave, and it seems this stubbornness would follow him throughout his life. He ended up graduating from high school and then went to Hitkarini College. But after having a challenging experience with the professor due to his disruptive behavior, he transferred to D.N. Jain College. Soon after that, he would decide he was going to take a year off of school to figure out what he really wanted to do with his life. And like many rebellious young people, he was rejecting the normal path in life. He didn't know if he wanted to go to college, get a job, get married, have kids. And it seems like he just wanted to take some time off to figure out exactly what he wanted to do with his life. So after taking this year off and apparently meditating a ton, he decided he was going to go back to school to study dun, da, 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 philosophy. He even goes on to get his master's in philosophy, which I'm sure at the beginning of the formation of this cult, he used this to his advantage. I mean, he had a master's in philosophy. That's like saying that you have a master's in thinking. He had a lot of ideas and he was going to share them. In 1957, after he graduated, he took a job as a philosophy professor at Raipur Sanskrit College, but had some pushback from the administration about some of the things that he was teaching. I mean, honestly, this guy seems like he just can't get along with anyone. He ended up transferring to another university again, the University of Jaipur, where he carried on with his career as a philosophy professor. In between classes, Bhagwan would travel, eager to spread his New Age philosophies. I mean, he has a master's in thinking. It wasn't enough that he sculpted the minds of the students who attended his classes for college. He needed widespread influence. So he traveled and shared his philosophies publicly. And it was now the early 60s, and hippie culture and free love ideology was spreading across the world like wildfire. So when he started preaching that sex was the way to super consciousness, people listened. Not only was Rajneesh saying that sex with anyone at any time was acceptable, but it was the gateway to enlightenment. He discouraged the ways of life people had been used to, stating that marriage was the antithesis of freedom and having children should be avoided so you don't lose your freedom to the time commitment a child would inevitably become. He encouraged group sex with anyone, anywhere, anytime. So at the time, if you were a young person searching for a justification to wanting to bang everything in sight, this was exactly the permission slip that you needed. He also denounced organized religion and, quite ironically, emphasized the importance of individuality. So, if you were someone who was hungry for ultimate freedom, but were also seeking a path towards enlightenment, if you were tired and overworked, you would be an ideal member for this group. By 1964, Rajneesh had amassed quite a following. He had already been conducting meditation camps and holding massive gatherings in India and in neighboring countries. One of the most interesting beliefs he was spreading at these talks and meditation camps was the idea that an orgasm was the best gateway to a meditative state because your mind was completely blank at the time. Maybe for you, Rajneesh, but some of us have to focus really hard to get there. Just saying. Anyways, this further promoted his ideas that sex needed to be casual and spiritual, that two people who were engaging in intercourse together were also engaging in meditation together, almost as if it was a sacred act. This idea, however, would have a very disturbing effect on the collective group's point of view about sex. It would begin to blur the lines of what was acceptable and what was not. One former member came out in recent years to expose people who had taken advantage of her when she was just a child. It seemed that within the cult, since everyone was free to have sex whenever they wanted with whomever they wanted, there was an expectation that all women needed to always be readily available for sex. If a woman were to deny a man, she would have to put him on a wait list of sorts, and if she refused completely, she would end up being taken advantage of. This action might be supported by other men in the group, so much that there have been reported incidences of men beating a woman so that another man could have intercourse with her. And obviously, thanks to YouTube, I have to use different language, but I think we all know what I'm saying. And it's just horrible. Just because sex and nudity become normalized doesn't mean that the word no doesn't exist. Autonomy still needs to exist. And it's ironic that in this cult that promotes individuality and ultimate freedom is also saying that, like, there are no boundaries. And, well, if I want to have sex with someone and they don't want to have sex with me, well, I'm going to do it anyways because I'm going to trust my instincts and do what I want to do. Like, no, that should not be allowed. And within this cult, it did not seem to have any boundaries. And young women, some as young as 12, would be violated repeatedly by men within the group. In the early days of the group, it is rumored that Rajneesh himself would do demonstrations, like sexual demonstrations, and involve himself in group sex acts as a way to demonstrate what he was teaching. But as time went on, it was not confirmed that he engaged in these group acts openly or frequently. That I'm sure a lot happened behind closed doors. Obviously, I am speculating there. He was seen, however, on several occasions inviting women up on stage with him and promoting them as like the ultimate spiritual sexual being, which I think is strange. It's almost like you're putting someone up for sale. Like, look at this woman. She is the ultimate beautiful sexual being. This is the type of woman you should want to be with. I think that's disgusting. It's also said that he would bring women up on stage, have them lay down, open their legs up so that their nether regions were exposed to him, and he would place his foot on their energy center and then fondle their breasts. This just sounds so predatory, and I can't imagine having an audience of sometimes thousands of people that would come to speak, and he's just doing that to one of his poor followers and making it sound like it's this beautiful, I'm lifting you up on a pedestal of beauty and sex, but also saying that like women are equal to men. It just feels so violating and sounds so humiliating. And meanwhile, the general public, like outside of the cult, is still rejecting Rajneesh and his teachings. India was still a Hindu country, and fundamentalist Hindu religious groups were finding his practices problematic. I mean, he was basically denouncing religion and promoting sex, and then behind closed doors, violating women and promoting that other men within the group violate women. I mean, that's just what we know. I'm sure it's a lot worse than what we know because a lot is unknown. So at the time, nationally, he would, maybe even internationally, he would become known as the sex guru, which to some may have been considered an insult, but it was probably what invoked a lot of intrigue to people wanting to seek out this guru. In 1970, Rajneesh claimed to be able to guide people through a practice that would lead them to divinity. It was called dynamic meditation, and it was made up of 4 stages. Stage 1 was chaotic breathing. You would try to build energy within yourself and trigger any stuck emotions within you. And you would do this really deep in and out, fast, intense breath work. Think in, out, in, out, in, out. It would be fast and loud. Stage 2 was the explode phase, where you would seemingly take all of that energy you've just built up within you and just let it out pretty violently, according to the videos. And you would just scream and cry and shout. And it's awesome if you're trying to like get some feelings out. Like, I've definitely yelled at a wall before and like thrown a pillow at the floor just to like get my frustration out. But some videos show people using the pillows to slam the floors, walls, other people. Like, it seemed to get like super violent between the members of the group. Basically, you're letting up all your pent up emotions, and it's basically this like animalistic free for all where you can scream in people's faces, shout, beat, hit, slam, like whatever you want to do, but it's part of this meditative practice. The third stage was the who stage. It looks kind of like a dance, like people would raise their hands up over their heads and just dance super wildly, jump up and down, like physically let all their energy out. It was just chaotic, it seemed like. But then, stage 4 was the silence phase. Everyone would sit in pure stillness and silence and meditate. And I can see how this experience could feel very cathartic. And I'm not promoting this practice at all because I think in extreme ways, if you do this all of the time, every day, it could be dangerous. And especially if like we don't know exactly the effects that it is having on your brain and your body. There was a study, though, done that showed that doing this meditation style over a 21-day period did decrease cortisol levels. And I know from my experience of doing breath work and moving your body meditation combo can be very relaxing. Like, I really like doing breath work, some type of workout like yoga, and then a meditation because you are kind of getting any like it's easier to meditate because you're not like fidgeting, twitching, and your brain is just tired because you just did like a rigorous workout. And it's very relaxing to be in that deep of a meditative state. But I think it's because you're really just getting like energy out of your body. Whether you're less stiff because you've done yoga or you've been super overwhelmed lately and finally like getting energy out and slowing down is helpful. And honestly, I believe practices like this can be helpful. Doing it the way the videos showed seemed really scary and violent to me. Like it literally looked like a horror movie with phase 2 specifically, like the screaming phase. Like, why are you screaming in my face? Let those feelings out, but do it by yourself. Why are you tackling each other and getting borderline violent in the name of healing? I don't think someone else should get hurt in order for you to heal. It just feels, honestly, misguided, in my opinion. I mean, some of the videos I found of this dynamic meditation were super concerning and disturbing, but people traveled far and wide to partake in this practice and to hear Rajneesh speak. So, a few years later, when he decided to take what seemed to be a vow of silence, it was kind of frustrating to people. But more about that in a little bit. Rajneesh seemed to attract very smart people into his cult, people who had very stressful, very successful careers. And I think it's because of this notion of you can just do whatever you want. You want to do it, you can go do it. It kind of encouraged people to reject all the things they knew already, especially in the West, like Americans, because it's so ingrained in our culture that working hard is and money is the ultimate key to success. And our days from childhood are so structured and dictated to us that we can see why this idea of doing whatever you want or just nothing was super appealing. I mean, I feel that way a lot too. Like, I'm kind of a workaholic and I'll work super hard, but I'll also need these like long times of like rest, or I've been so anxious to get stuck in a job I don't like, or I've been afraid to buy a home because like I don't want to get stuck in one way of life. I want to explore them all. But when you have hardworking, successful people attracted to your cult, that means that you have an easier path to wealth for yourself. So, now I want to cover what exactly was attracting so many young, successful people into this group. The group was reaching its heights in the 70s. It was the middle of the sexual liberation and the feminist movement. Women were not only wanting to be accepted socially and economically as equals to their male counterparts, they wanted to express their sexuality as open and as freely as men had been doing for a really long time. Many women at the time were starting to break free of the confines of societal expectations. They were really first starting to begin to reject the ideas of getting married, having children, being stay at home mothers, and wanted to devote more time to their careers and be taken as seriously as men were. But many of the women of the time had kind of hit a crossroads because they were starting to feel like they had to choose one or the other, being a mother or being a career woman. It just felt impossible to the women of the 70s to have both. But Rajneesh, he said that he believed women could have it all. They could have successful careers and be parents and perhaps do all of these things even better than men. Within his ashram, they just worked similar jobs to the ones they had outside of the group, but were also encouraged to embrace their nurturing side and their intuitive gifts that they held, and also be readily available to sex whenever men wanted it. So, kind of like counterproductive, Rajneesh, but I digress. Also, his right hand man, or I guess woman, was a woman. And when Rajneesh retreated to a solo silent meditation in early 1980s, and stopped publicly addressing his followers, he delegated all of his tasks and communication, all of his power, really, to a woman. And as for the attraction to the group for all genders, because it was predominantly women, but still 54% women, that's not like that's almost equal. It was just super attractive to everybody at the time. People were just becoming more and more individualistic at the time. They were abandoning what they had always known, the religions and societal structures that had been built for them, and they were starting to rebel against them. So when people heard Rajneesh put an emphasis on the importance of self and self-enlightenment and self-improvement, it was alluring to people. He encouraged people to follow their instincts, do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. He discouraged getting married and having children. He encouraged free love, nudity, multiple partners. He encouraged people to experience pleasure in every single experience that was had. He shared a concept called the new man, which indicated that one would experience true independence and freedom when they discovered all of their desires and then indulged on those desires freely. So when you're stuck in a job and your family is giving you a certain set of consequences and expectations, and you're feeling tired and overwhelmed and bogged down, of course, this would seem to be like an oasis, an escape. It would seem like, they say the grass isn't always greener, but that's what it was being presented as. And you have a man who is holding a position of authority, who is a philosopher of the time, saying it's okay to want to literally abandon your job and your family to come live on a commune with me. I mean, yeah, people were going to do it, unfortunately. He said that there should be no religion, I mean, I guess except his, and there should be no real law, that we should all live in harmony with nature. So in the hippie revolution of the 60s and the 70s, his philosophies were just really fitting in with the times. Rajneesh encouraged his followers to be physically near him. In the 70s, he had built an ashram in India, and he invited his guests to not just come for a visit, but to live on the commune, in the community with other sannyasins, as they called themselves. Again, he believed in this concept called the new man. It was the idea that humanity could live together in harmony with nature, that all beings were equal, and we could be self-governed. And of course, this is a romantic idea, but honestly, I don't think that humans are capable of it. No offense, but we are all so ego-driven and selfish to be able to live in harmony. Have you ever had a roommate and there was just instant tension, let alone living in a commune with a ton of other people that have different backgrounds than you and might have a considerable different way of life, and also just want to have sex with you constantly? I mean, for me, I would be so aggravated. I need my alone time. Leave me alone. So visiting this commune wasn't just a free ride. Not only did you have to pay a hefty weekly or monthly payment to stay there, you were also expected to work. Yeah. So you were paying to work there. So yeah, you'd be provided food and lodging and spiritual enlightenment and get to listen to Rajneesh speak every day, but you were essentially paying for a job and communal living. Just sounds not fair and honestly kind of dirty to me. And I mean dirty in that everyone was probably sharing the space and it was probably dirty. Have y'all ever been to a music festival? It gets dirty. But on top of making money from his commune, Rajneesh was selling books, recordings, meditation courses, enlightenment courses, and charging thousands of dollars of monthly rent for his ashram. So it's safe to say that Rajneesh grew pretty wealthy. And unlike other leaders who discouraged materialism, Rajneesh embraced it. And I think that was another allure to the general public, especially Americans, where we come from a inherently materialistic society. He'd show up to his talks with wearing beautiful clothing and expensive jewelry, and he'd roll up in Rolls Royces. I mean, he had almost 100 Rolls Royces by the time this saga ended. It's just why? You're sitting in a room meditating in silence most of your life. What are all those Rolls Royces doing out there? Can't you donate to starving kids? Come on. Meanwhile, he was demanding, listen to this, he was demanding that his followers rid themselves of worldly possessions, and he's dictating what they can wear. They were expected to wear colors of the sunrise to remind them of their life's rise to see their own true potential. So there would be waves of people wearing orange, maroon, and purple, just following Rajneesh wherever he was. He expected everyone to wear a necklace with a picture of him around their neck. Like, what? What? I mean, this guy, Rajneesh, was a for-profit guru. His followers would abandon their clothes, their money, their lives, some even their children, to go be with their guru. They would literally empty their own bank accounts to put their money into the ashram's bank account. They'd listen to him speak every day, and then they would live together with each other. Each night they were welcomed to a new lover, and their group escapades at night would fill the airwaves of whatever town they were in. I mean, they were literally abandoning their old identity to embrace this group mentality and whatever name Rajneesh decided to give them, because yeah, he gave his followers new names. So he's on one hand saying individuality is important and sacred, and on the other hand saying, come to my ashram, I'm going to give you a new name, get rid of everybody outside of this group. What? So these followers were promised sex, community, enlightenment. And this is all in the middle of the human potential movement, where change and growth are being promoted by the masses. So, like, what more could you want if you are a hippie in the 70s? But unbeknownst to his followers, Rajneesh was experiencing some trouble with the law in India. People from all over the world were moving to his ashram, and they were violating immigration laws in the country. And Rajneesh, the materialistic spiritualist, hadn't been paying his taxes, so he needed an out. But Rajneesh, I thought this ashram was the promised land, wasn't it? Oh, no, I forgot. The promised land is only the promised land if you don't have to pay taxes to your government, right? So obviously he would move to America, one of the most heavily taxed countries in the world. Yeah, smart move. He was also under fire spiritually. Religious groups had grown increasingly angry at Rajneesh and his points of view. They saw his following increasing and they wanted to do something about it. So in May of 1980, during one of his morning speeches, an attempt was made on Rajneesh's life. Due to this ongoing political and religious strife, Rajneesh knew time was ticking and he knew he needed to flee India. And he just left kind of suddenly. Rajneesh enlisted his secretary at the time, Mayoga Lakshmi, to travel the world looking for a land where he could build his dream commune for the new man. But unfortunately, she was unsuccessful, so Rajneesh enlisted the help of Ma Anand Sheela, who had been Lakshmi's assistant. So she's the assistant to the assistant of the guru. Okay, we all got it? That was confusing for me at first. Sheela had always been eager to please Rajneesh. She has often said that she was in love with him, but denies that they ever had a sexual relationship, which, thank goodness, because she was only 16 when she met him. But I would honestly still consider this grooming, because she would go on to do literally anything her guru told her to do. Or should I say directed her to do, because in 1981, this is when Rajneesh took a vow of silence. So swarms of his loyal followers had flocked to India to hear him speak every day. And then he just ups and leaves unexpectedly. It's like, we're paying money to come live here and work for you and listen to your wisdom, and suddenly you just stop talking? So where's the product? Like, obviously this is all a scam. But Sheela, she was on it. She understood that Rajneesh and his reputation were fragile. He needed someone to blame for any bad press, and Sheela was happy to please her master and step up to the plate. So Sheela found an 80,000-acre piece of land in a little corner of the world just outside the tiny town of Antelope, Oregon, in the United States. The epitome of freedom, right? She purchased what was formerly known as Big Muddy Ranch for nearly $6 million. Antelope was a small retirement town of less than 50 people at the time. It was also in the middle of nowhere, quiet, and the local seniors, who were mostly on fixed incomes, loved their life there. Everyone knew everyone else, so When these new neighbors moved in drones and brought hordes of building supplies with them, of course they would ruffle a few feathers. It's like when a new neighbor moves in and you just have to like kind of peek outside and like see what they're doing, make sure they don't use a leaf blower at 8 a.m. on a Sunday, just like a little friendly neighborhood spying. It makes sense, honestly. Like, you've gotten used to a certain kind of life that you've been living for decades, and suddenly tons of people start wandering into town. Like, I understand the concern. I really do. But I also fully understand the desire to practice whatever you believe. And it's a gift to those of us that live in America that have that freedom. But the US at the time also had a law called the Home Rule, which meant that if 150 people voted yes, you could create a new state and essentially govern yourselves. You would be what we call in the United States incorporated. So in the United States, we have freedom to assemble and freedom of religion and the Home Rule all working in favor of this cult and honestly, several other cults. This does lead me to a speculation. Like, are our laws here making it easier for cults to thrive in America? Because oftentimes we see in these cults is that they end up breaking the law in one way or the other. And several groups, even to this day, still live in their own little cities doing their own little creepy things. I mean, if you look at the fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints, they literally perform child marriages, incest, and polygamy, all of which are illegal in the United States. And honestly, they're some of the most absolutely, or they should be at least, unanimously seen as deplorable and disgusting. But they're still able to do it because of freedom of their religion. It's just like, where do we draw the line on what's religiously acceptable and just what's across the board always against the law? There are 10,000 cults thriving in the United States today. So it just makes me wonder if some of the loopholes in our lawmaking is making this an easier place to do things that would otherwise be thought as completely immoral. Are things like the home law making it easier for cults to take advantage of the systems in place here in the United States? Well, in the case of Rajneesh and his followers, the answer would be yes. 154 people voted unanimously to create the incorporated town of Rajneeshpuram, much to the dismay of the locals in the nearby town of Antelope. The followers who had already moved to Rajneeshpuram got to work. The cult had attracted some great minds, engineers, lawyers, city planners, and these people were innovators. They were driven by the ideas that they were creating a town that would live in perfect harmony. They built water systems, farms, a meditation center, several A-frame houses. There was an airport there. Like, they were proud of what they were creating. They were excited to be getting the ranch to a place where it could be the oasis they dreamed it could be. But there would be trouble in paradise. The land was zoned for agricultural purposes only, and local governments had tried to encourage the group to move their larger structures and infrastructures into a more urban area that could accommodate more people. They had purchased a hotel in Portland where members were waiting until the ranch was complete, and they just couldn't turn them away. This obstacle was upsetting to Sheela and Rajneesh, so most likely to retaliate, they began to buy up property in Antelope and expanded into that small town. They purchased homes and old coffee houses. The group of strange red-clad neighbors were no longer neighbors. It's like they had just moved right in with the townspeople. They'd infiltrated the territory, so to speak. They started to build businesses to try to bring more money into the organization. So they would obviously need business permits to do so. But their request for business permits was rejected by a group called Thousand Friends of Oregon. Thousand Friends of Oregon is a nonprofit that deals with land and how it's used. So, of course, they were going to be involved in permitting such a large plot of land. The folks in Antelope began to get concerned that the sannyasins wanted to take over their town, take over their schools, their churches, everything they had known before. Would the people who had lived there for so long even get to practice their own religion anymore? Would their children be educated the way they thought was acceptable if this new cult came into power over the town? Most likely not. The townspeople were scared. So they decided to hold a vote to disincorporate themselves the town of Antelope, effectively giving control of the town back to the state. But of course, Sheela and the other followers were not going to allow that to happen. They wanted to control the town. So instead, they registered followers to vote and they made everyone vote no. They ended up winning that vote and they renamed that town to Rajneesh. They reserved a park in town to be a nude sunbathing park, and they'd throw these loud, wild group sex parties at night, just, further stoking the flame to the locals in the community. And look, I'm very pro-sex. And hey, if you're comfortable enough in your body to wander the streets naked, by all means, do you. Just, don't give anyone gonorrhea, which apparently ran rampant in this cult. But these people had a very peaceful way of life before y'all rolled into town. Like, have a little respect. If you are of the belief that everyone gets to choose what they believe because we're all individuals and we get to do whatever we want whenever we want, then you have to let people practice their own religion and live life the way they want to live life. It is hypocritical for you to roll into a town full of senior citizens who are just trying to retire peacefully. Like, they've had enough stress in their life. They probably lived through the Great Depression. You know what I'm saying? Just cut them a break, leave them alone. Whew, rant over. As time went on, things were not so peaceful in Paradise. After the hotel in Portland was attacked with bombs the following year, Sheela became a lot more militant. She began wearing a gun in her holster, and members of the cult received tactical training, and they too would walk around with rifles. This, as well as the ongoing conflict between the cult and the community, as well as politicians starting to get involved, created a media frenzy around the group. And since Rajneesh was still silent, Sheela would be his mouthpiece, and she would be very aggressive and only get more and more heated as time went on. Within the cult, she was seen as passionate, and she furthered this us versus them mentality against the people outside the cult. They were bigots and intolerant. There was an idea that this was something they would have to fight against until they could, in effect, take over the entire world with their peaceful ideology. Sheela was frequently threatening the media that they were going to take over the world, but as a loving, free society. Like, what? She was insulting, and she wasn't afraid to use strong language to express herself. If she hadn't been the face of a cult, I might say, wow, this is admirable, especially for a woman at the time in rural America. But now, knowing what her endgame was, I just can't get on board with her or her behavior, because it was really just to push the ideas of this dangerous cult and take advantage of more people. Just give it a rest. As time went on, the feud between the cult and the government grew. The cult wanted to continue expanding, and to do so, they wanted to be more involved in the government. The government had already revoked their incorporated status, and that alone angered Sheela. Because of the importance of separation of church and state in the United States Constitution, authorities decided that it was unlawful for the Rajneeshis, as they called themselves, to govern their own religious commune and expand into local governments. But they were going to attempt to do so all the same. Sheela and Rajneesh believed that if they had their hand in the government on a larger scale, they'd be able to vote for their own benefit. It already worked in Antelope anyways. Rajneeshis had made up almost the entire city council thanks to their participation in the democratic process that is the pillar of this country. So then they set their eyes on Wasco County. They wanted to expand. They wanted more power, especially political power. So Wasco County is the county that their ranch was in. If they had any control there, their problems would be solved, or so they thought. Wasco County was made up of a large population, far larger than the Rajneeshis currently had at their commune. So if they wanted to win, Sheela would have to be creative. She decided to reach out to and befriend some of society's most vulnerable people. She began targeting the unhoused, addicts, and ex-convicts, touting the commune as the only welcoming place these people had. She and the followers welcomed them with open arms. So, of course, she encouraged them all to get registered to vote so they could be reintroduced into society again and partake in their rights. These people genuinely thought this cult was trying to help them. I mean, the cult was providing them housing, food, 2 beers every single day. But they were also encouraging them to get involved in the discourse, to speak at events about their right to vote. But local lawmakers were getting really suspicious. How were thousands of people suddenly registering to vote in their county? People who likely hadn't been living in their county long enough to be eligible to vote there. While governments were weighing in on their options, Sheela was weighing hers. The new arrivals were beginning to change the dynamic of the commune. They were rowdy, loud, and they didn't quite embrace the true nature of the community. How could she calm them down? Well, she would drug them, of course. Yeah, this woman had the audacity to drug people, some of which were in recovery from addiction, because she thought they were a little too rowdy. Furthermore, this cult had been preaching anti marriage rhetoric since its inception. But how were so many people moving to this commune in this country and registering to vote? Well, several people were faking relationships with Americans, getting fake married in like a different state, and then going to Oregon, getting back with their previous partners, and then registering to vote and going on with their lives. Like, what happened to ultimate freedom, huh? That's the thing about cults and cult leaders, though. There's always going to be some level of hypocrisy. The government entities that be ended up revoking the voting registrations, claiming that there were a few fraudulent ones, so they were going to reject all of the ones that had been submitted so that they could vet the legitimacy of the registrants. Sheila's plan had effectively failed. So, what was she going to do with all those unhoused folks she'd pretended to care about? She was probably going to make sure that they could stay and integrate into the community well, and there would just be peace and sex and frivolity and fun for everybody. Wrong. One day, she literally announced to them that they were no longer welcome, had them pack up their things, and then she bussed them out to random towns and left them there. Like they were nothing. She really just like Uno reversed them. And it's sad. It's hard enough for people to get back on their feet after being in those kinds of circumstances. And Sheela and, of course, Rajneesh, because I'm sure he's the true mastermind behind all of this, they were really taking advantage of these people's vulnerabilities. And it's truly just so disgusting to me. So Sheela and Rajneesh needed a new plan, which was already into a little bit of effect because they had already been procuring drugs and substances, and had already created a lab on site in the commune to work on these substances. Yeah, things were escalating really quickly, and this video would literally be like 12 parts if I tried to fit everything in. So just go watch Wild Wild Country if you're curious about some more of the details, because it's fascinating, it's disturbing, it's upsetting, just all of the things. So please go watch it. Anyways, Sheela and Rajneesh needed a new plan, a new way to get voters. I mean, they were severely outnumbered at this point. They needed people to vote for them, or they needed people to just not vote for their opposition. So their solution? Make sure these people didn't show up to vote by any means necessary. Although plots to kill were discussed by those in the inner circle and attempts were made, Sheela and her local inner circle instead decided on a simple little poisoning. No big deal, right? So they targeted the town of The Dalles, Oregon, which held a larger population of voters. Their plan was to expose several restaurants in the area to salmonella, and unfortunately, their plan worked because 751 people became ill and 45 were hospitalized. But luckily, no one was killed. Authorities had caught wind of this and held an investigation, and the CDC in Atlanta was even called in to investigate because they'd never seen anything like this before. So many people getting deathly ill within a small radius in a short period of time. It was deeply concerning for the community and worrisome for the government. Was there a foreign entity trying to attempt a bioterror attack? And how widespread could it be? I mean, it was obviously very concerning. Things within the cult were also crumbling at this point. Sheela was feeling underappreciated by Rajneesh, who had been spending time with a wealthy woman from Los Angeles who he seemed to be getting along with a little too well. This woman thought she could sweep in and become Rajneesh's first-hand woman, not on Sheila's watch. But it seemed like her and Rajneesh's relationship was forever changed. mean, Sheela was stressed, overwhelmed, and one day her mother came to her with a concern about her health, and 2 days later, in September 1985, she left, or fled, rather, to Germany, and was even followed by some of her inner circle. And this incensed Rajneesh. He was no longer in control over his most faithful servant. And he finally broke his silence after 3.5 years and decided to address his followers, and they invited the media. He exposed that they had tried to murder people and bug people's homes. I mean, Sheela had wiretapped the phones within the community so that they could surveil all of the conversations their followers were having with people outside of the community and most likely punish them if anything negative was being said about the community. Rajneesh tried to out Sheela by saying that she didn't say goodbye to him and only criminals try to escape. Sounds a lot like when you just randomly left India, Rajneesh. Projecting much? So he invited authorities onto the commune to investigate her and her wrongdoing. Well, ironically, he would soon flee the area for fear of getting arrested himself. A task force was created and they set up shop in Rajneeshpuram. They had secretly been investigating Sheela and Rajneesh for years, so they already had a lot of collateral. Within 4 days, they were able to indict Rajneesh in a 35-count indictment. He was tipped off somehow, though, and he fled the area, but was arrested in North Carolina the following morning. Sheela and some of her loyal followers were then arrested in Germany and extradited back to the United States. Both and some of Sheila's followers were found guilty of their laundry list of charges after making guilty plea deals. Rajneesh paid a fine and got to go back to India, and Sheela was found guilty of attempted murder, along with several other crimes, and was sent to jail for 20 years. But she got out after 2 years for good behavior. Good behavior. What? I know we talk a lot about how there's a fine line between being like victim and perpetrator, but she was a perpetrator in this mess. She tried to kill 750 people, or at least incapacitate them in some way. Like, what? So then she moved to Switzerland and has just been living her best life there ever since. She's actually, and I don't know if this is completely up to date, but she was running 2 nursing homes out there. Which, I'm sorry, but if someone had tried to incapacitate hundreds of people with a chemical or something she'd created in a lab, or had attempted to murder someone intravenously, meaning injecting a drug into their system, maybe don't have her be in charge of administering medication to senior citizens. Just a thought. Also, over the next couple years, Rajneesh tried to rebrand to Osho, a Buddhist name, but I thought he didn't like religion. But no, it's fine if he's rebranding. I mean, I'm sure this was a way to clear his name of the negativity surrounding it. And, he tried to keep carrying on being a spiritual guru, but he would eventually pass away in 1990. And what has happened since? Well, people just still support his organization. Celebrities tout him as a great spiritual leader, and there are still meditation and yoga centers all around the world that promote him and his teachings. And it's really just so sad to think that this rebrand worked. I mean, I didn't even know that Osho wasn't his real name until I saw that documentary. I didn't have any idea that he was attached to any type of cult. I still hear his quotes being read in yoga classes, and I'll see online acquaintances share his quotes. And I'm just like so sad and frustrated that a man who victimized so many people and treated so many people so horribly and promoted essaying women is still being celebrated today. We cannot forget history like this. We cannot forget that this man was not a guru. He was a manipulative and deviant cult leader. This is a really sad example of how a cult leader finds someone else to be their mouthpiece. I find it concerning and convenient that Rajneesh decides to do this spiritual act of taking a vow of silence right when he's going through troubles with the law in India, so that he can't technically be blamed for stuff because he didn't technically do it and he didn't technically say anything. So all of the blame is put on Sheela. And should she be to blame for the part she played in it? Absolutely. but she still almost like worships him. The way she spoke in the documentary was so upsetting to me because it still feels like she idolizes Osho in a weird way. It reminds me of Allison Mack and Keith Raniere, where Keith Raniere is literally on recording dictating to Allison Mack how she needed to conduct the brandings to make it look like the women were consenting to the act. And she got put away in prison because she facilitated these brandings and made it look like women were consenting. But Keith Raniere was still the mastermind behind all of it. And I think it's something similar that happened here. I mean, Osho and Sheela had a very deep, intricate relationship. She met him when she was a child and was basically brought up in this cult and then made to be his right-hand woman. I mean, she had all this power. She was trusted by the guru. People looked up to her. She had authority. And sure, maybe she took some liberties. Maybe she presented herself in a way that she shouldn't have. But at the end of the day, she was doing what her cult leader was directing her to do and was then blamed for it. And she took it way too far, and she should still be in jail, potentially. I don't know, though, because at the same time, I see her as a victim, too. And I see her still stuck in her thinking. But I also see her as a vile, maybe even evil perpetrator. And that's, again, we've talked about it so often on this channel, that fine line between like victim and perpetrator. And it's honestly so sad to me that thousands of people were negatively affected by this cult. And it's so easy to forget that at the hands of one man, that he was not just justifying terrible behavior within his following, but he was promoting that bad behavior, that so many people were negatively affected. Children were essayed, women were essayed, children were abandoned, right? And you can argue all day long, like, well, they chose it. They chose it. They chose to do this. But they were led to believe that it was the only path to the thing they wanted in life. So, did they really have the freedom to choose? We talk a lot on this channel about the illusion of truth, where a cult leader or a manipulative person will present you with option A and say, well, yeah, you can definitely take this option, but here's an outcome that is bad. Or you can take this option and there's no negative outcome. And you get to stay with me and I'll approve of you and I'll love you. So if you're choosing this option, oh, and there's a really bad circumstance, and then this option, which one are you going to choose? You're not choosing this one because you've already been told that it's going to be a bad outcome. You're going to choose this outcome that you've already been told is safe, but you're not actually truly free to choose. You've been manipulated into the choice that the cult leader or manipulative person wants you to make. I'm sure I could go on a long rant. Some of you have already been giving me feedback like, these intros are too long. You're talking for too long. And I get it. You're right. I'm working on it. I promise. I will probably do a follow-up video to this topic. If there's anything about this topic that you'd like to share, maybe you have a family member who is involved in Osho's group, or you have any insight or professional points of view to what happened, or I mean, gosh, maybe if you were even involved in some way, I would love to speak with you. Please leave a comment down below or email me at erinfinley@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to let me know what you think down below, and I appreciate you all so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much. Bye.